What it do? Dream Team, it's your boy D Neal back with another reaction video. This reaction is to America is not Europe. And I don't think America should be Europe, right? They're different countries and they should be different. Is there things that America can learn from Europe? Sure, I think so. But I think America shouldn't try to be Europe. America should try to be America. You feel me? I love America. But before we jump into this, what I need you guys to do is subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon all up top. You'll subscribe to any of it, put all the links in the description. All you gotta do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me. Love talking to you guys. You guys are the most incredible team. I'm human. I talk back. And also, Europe shouldn't try to be America, right? Europe should be Europe. And there's things I feel like you can learn on both sides, but be yourself. That's one of the things we're taught as kids. All right. Well, we got America's not Europe. See what we're talking
born
about.
and grew up in Denmark. And these are countries where the government spends taxes and spends approximately twice the level of the United States. Mm-hmm. And while I am very sympathetic to many of your spending proposals, especially on the things you mentioned on early childhood and single payer and the like, I also know that these are countries that heavily tax everybody, not just the rich people. Middle classes, they have consumption taxes on everything of 20%. So while I'm very sympathetic to what you say, my sense is still that you would like to spend as a Scandinavian, but not tax as one. Is that correct?
We have the answers.
Oh, you would like to spend as one, but not tax as one. Yeah, don't tax me though. If that's what it is, I don't want don't charge me no extra taxes. I don't need them. I'm broke enough without them. All right, well, we keep it going. Keep it going.
But not taxed as one.
It's interesting.
The answer is, and you raised some very good points.
Comparing the US with Europe and countries in Europe would be naive, oversimplistic, and offend a bunch of people. Land masses are complex. But I'm going to go ahead and compare them anyways, because some of the comparisons between Europe and the US remain way too superficial.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
It's not uncommon to obsess over the usual suspects for why the US is less equal than Europe and also has less good quality, affordable social programs. The analysis is simple. The US has more billionaires and taxes them less. Europe has less billionaires but taxes them more. Need a larger tax base to fund popular social programs and also less inequality? Just raise the taxes on the rich, like the Europeans do. Now, although the tax rates for rich people explain some part of the difference, it doesn't explain enough. Europeans can afford good social programs because a lot of Europeans pay a lot for them, mainly through indirect taxes. And Europeans are also more equal before tax is even factored in because a lot of the social programs they pay more for also reduce pre-tax inequality. Where Americans deal with a sales tax at their final point of sale, Europeans deal with a VAT, which is a consumption tax that taxes at multiple steps across entire supply chains. This means that a lot of things in Europe will be more expensive, but that public money can be redistributed towards social programs that will reduce before tax inequality even more. But the US has, so far, been unable to adopt the same. Why? Well, in part because taxing the wealthiest of society is easier to advertise and justify than taxing everybody a lot more. In Europe, most people don't really need to be convinced about paying for their welfare states because it works sufficiently for most of them. But in the US, there's an intimate struggle with deciding whether pre-distribution will be a state, local, or federal solution. Part of the reason is
I think you can't adopt the system now because there's gonna be too much backlash. Like, know what I'm saying? If I'm paying this amount of tax right now and then you like up my taxes like big time, like 20% or so, like there's gonna be a lot of backlash. And I understand, but their taxes, the reason they're paying those taxes is now healthcare is very cheap, if not free over there. You know what I'm saying? And so you see what those taxes are going to. And so you understand that program. You're like, that's great. Over here, it's hard to switch it. You feel me? All right, but I'm gonna let it keep going.
Whether pre-distribution will be a state, local, or federal solution. Part of the reason is that in the US, the federal government gets the most media attention, while state and local governments can avoid scrutiny. This means that
Facts.
minimum wage hikes in the US are practically always seen as a responsibility for the federal government, which has
Facts.
to delicately balance different costs of living, like laborers living in New York City and miners living in West Virginia. In Europe, though, a country like France or Denmark can opt for different geographically sensitive policy while also being held more directly into account because the assignment of responsibility is clearer to its citizens.
There's this definition of a wicked problem, which is circulating around in the literature, which suggests that a wicked problem is wicked if it has so many dimensions to it that you can't go at one angle to the problem and try to fix it. And I think school finance is like that. So school districts get money from their local communities in the form of property taxes. They'll also get money from the state, and the state might give them money through multiple formulas. And then a portion, a much smaller portion, about 9 or 10%, comes from the federal government. So even if you try to solve the problem at, say, the state level, there are these other funding sources that come with their own restrictions, which ultimately affect how the money gets used in schools.
In Connecticut, a U.S. state, a school in Bridgeport will be poorer by virtue of being surrounded by poor properties, while a school in Greenwich will be richer because it is surrounded by richer properties. This is because local taxes are largely funded by property values in the area. However, this concept fails to explain everything. Educational disparities also exist across Europe and within its countries. The US is not unique for having a system that predisposes poor children to poor resources. Education systems are complex. Finland is not the same as Sweden, and resources invested in education and the quality that follows does not seem like a linear relationship. The US's unique situation is that its quality does not match the amount that the US actually spends on it. One of the problems with answering why resources don't match the quality you would expect in the US is because the decentralized nature of school districts makes it pretty difficult to actually identify what spending works and what doesn't. Overall, there are some indications that, compared with Europe, the amount of staffing, the associated health and retirement benefits, alongside transportation, all add up to more costs for the American education system. But the differences don't end there.
In the 1990s, as the crime rate was plummeting, as American life was getting safer and safer, Americans freaked out and thought that if they take their eyes off their children, the children will be abducted. Now, this goes back, the fear was stoked by cable TV in the 1980s. There were a few high-profile abductions. But it's not until the 1990s that we really start locking kids up and saying, you cannot be outside until you're 14 or 15. We took this essential period of childhood from about 8 to 12, when kids throughout history have practiced independence, have gotten into adventures, have made rafts and floated down the Mississippi River. We took that period and said, you don't get to practice independence until it's too late, until that period is over.
That's facts. That's facts, man. For me, I was actually allowed to play outside, and so I don't know. And I was born in the 90s. I played outside like with my brothers or my sisters or with friends. You walk like 20 minutes to a friend's house by yourself, and y'all just had a good time. But nowadays, no, it's not. You're not leaving your kid unsupervised, especially 8 to 12. No. Somebody's watching them, and you're gonna make sure that as a parent. And so is dead
Period.
on.
And said, you don't get to practice independence until it's too late, until that period is over.
Kids in the US are raised differently than kids in Europe. Some blame the planning that produced more isolated American families, some the over-paranoia towards kidnapping in the 1980s, and others point to an increasingly competitive environment where parents try to give their children an edge over the others by helicoptering them. It's really not that far a stretch to say that many European children could be considered to have more freedom at an earlier age. American children are less likely to be able to walk to school alone compared with European children, which you can of course connect to overall crime rates, and authoritative school policy is still much more accepted across the US than it is in Europe.
We, the people of the United States.
We've moved so far away from the Constitution that in many ways we don't even...
So, the real key to the distinctiveness of America is the structure of our government. One part of it, of course, is the independence of the judiciary. But there's a lot more. There are very few countries in the world, for example, that have a bicameral legislature. Oh, England has a House of Lords for the time being, but the House of Lords has no substantial power. They can just make the Commons pass a bill a second time. France has a Senate, it's honorific. Italy has a Senate, it's honorific. Very few countries have two separate bodies in the legislature equally powerful. That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same.
Big time. If you don't agree with each other, it's a lie. What can get done if both parties are arguing with each other the whole time?
That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same language through two different bodies elected in a different fashion.
Yeah.
Very few countries in the world have a separately elected chief executive. Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary. Because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick him out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature. And, the Europeans...
The difference is simple. European countries are mainly nations, not federations. A European state, if it existed, could never be the same as the US. Written in their constitution, US states are modeled after the federal government, and state governments, which mirror the one above, usually have their own chamber of representatives, a senate, and also have an executive mirrored after their president. In Europe, if there was any state that was above the countries that made it up, it would have to be modeled from those very different countries beneath it, rather than serving as a model for the countries below it. This is an important difference because it means that any kind of European government would have to balance parliamentary systems with presidential republics, federal states with unitary ones, and they'll be expected to create a system that hopefully pleases each one sufficiently. All in all, although the differences between the two are practically endless and some are near impossible to actually describe, it's still a worthwhile effort to try and figure a few out and also discuss them. In some way, Europe has more breathing room to understand what it wants to be, which is no easy task, because whatever you think Europe is, it can still look across the Atlantic and realize what it definitely is not.
I feel like I've seen that's a lot of differences. Affordable.
If you're trying to lose belly fat, stop.
That video was awesome. I think that video was awesome in explaining some of these differences. And there are differences. Like I said, you can learn things, but I don't feel like you should try to model yourself completely, right, after another country and vice versa. That's all we got for this one, though. If you guys got a favorite video you want me to react to, you can subscribe to Patreon if I get suggestion, or in the description section of the Google form link. Hit the link, fill out your suggestions, send it to me. When we get to yours faster than others, fill out premium, but make sure you subscribe to the channel. Ring the notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon, all up top. Subscribe if you haven't. Put all the links in the description. All you gotta do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me. I talk back, and I love talking to you guys. You guys are the most incredible team on YouTube. It's your boy D Neal. Out.